near critical mass, so we'll get started in a second. My name is Kim McQuaid. I'm the Asia Foundation's Chief Strategy and Legal Advisor based here in Washington, D.C. On behalf of my Asia Foundation colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome all of you in person and all of you who are joining us virtually for this afternoon's panel event on strengthening civic spaces in South Asia. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, the event is being recorded, so we request that you have your consent to do this. We can make the event available to others who can't join later. And we're going to have an informal reception at the close of the panel, and if you have time to join us and have a word with our panelists and others that are here. I believe that most of you are familiar with the work of the Asia Foundation, so I'll just briefly share a couple of points. We're celebrating our 70th anniversary in 2024. Since 1954, we've partnered with governments, civil society, the private sector, academic specialists, and individual change makers in addressing some of the toughest social and economic challenges facing Asia and Pacific regions. Through a combination of grant-making, technical support, and hands-on engagement of our program teams in 20-plus countries, we support more responsive public policy, decision-making, broader civic engagement, peaceful cooperation, more equitable and inclusive economic growth and social development, and the bold vision of the new generation of leaders, innovators, and social entrepreneurs. Our panel event corresponds with a visit this week by a group of partners, the Asia Foundation country representatives and program specialists, who are closely involved in the South Asia Governance Fund. Implemented by TAF through the generous financial support of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of South and Central Asia, the SAGF program strengthens civil society capacity in 5 countries: Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. The program supports partners in addressing critical governance challenges, combating disinformation, promoting gender equality, advocating on behalf of vulnerable populations, and addressing environmental issues, amongst the many issues addressed. To date, this exciting regional program has supported more than 90 civil society partners whose efforts have fostered greater accountability and transparency across the region. And one feature of the program that we especially value is the opportunity to facilitate experience sharing, networking, and even coalition building through virtual and in-person gatherings with partners from the 5 participating countries. We'll be hearing from some of our partners shortly through a discussion facilitated by my colleague Faisal bin Siraj, our country representative for Bangladesh. He'll be introducing our panelists and inviting them to share their experience. Personally, I take special delight in the fact that at least 3 of our partner speakers are individuals whom I've been privileged to know and work with for more than 3 decades now. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Horst, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary with the State Department's Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs. A member of the U.S. Senior Foreign Service, Ms. Horst most recently served as Minister Counselor for Public Diplomacy with the U.S. Embassy in Berlin. Previous diplomatic assignments include Director of the Security, Transnational Affairs and Assistance Office, the South Asian Central Affairs Bureau, Charge d'Affaires and Deputy Chief Commission for the U.S. Embassy in Estonia, and earlier assignments in Afghanistan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Pakistan. Ms. Horst holds a bachelor degree in History and German from the University of Kansas and a master's in Modern German History from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Ms. Horst, grateful to have you with us this afternoon and invite you to share your remarks.
Thank you. How's the volume here? Good? Okay. So, Kim, thank you so much for your kind remarks, and I am truly, truly delighted to be here today. Because in the Foreign Service and in the State Department, we move around a lot, and we don't always get to see the fruits of our labor. An idea that we start in one job is finished by someone else, or we pick up the baton on a long-standing program and finish it for our predecessors. So it's with real joy that I'm here today to celebrate the success of the South Asia Governance Fund, or I'm going to call it the Fund. I was, as Kim said, the Office Director for Security and Transnational Affairs when this all started in 2019. And when the United States was pivoting to the Indo-Pacific region and bringing new resources to bear, we prioritized our small office budget for governance, which was a novel choice at the time. We wanted to pilot a flexible, responsible fund for governance and found the best partner to manage it. When I left for my next post, I understood that I wouldn't get a chance to see the effort all the way through. But I was wrong. Since I returned to the Bureau as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, I got to see how the program panned out. And I feel like I can talk about the full life cycle of the program from my perspective. So I'd like to use this time to talk about where we started, what we achieved, and what's next for this nimble and unusual program. But before I get into my remarks, I want to thank a few of our partners, particularly at the Asia Foundation. Kim McQuay, the Chief Strategy and Legal Officer, Dinesha De Silva, right there, the TAF Sri Lanka Country Director, Faisal bin Siraj, Faisal's right there we go, the Bangladesh Country Director, and Megan Nalbo, the Nepal Country Director. She's not with us today, and the entire TAF team. You, for 5 years, you've proved the value of a top-notch implementing partner. We value TAF for their capable management of this extraordinarily complex fund, with multiple funding windows, the wide range of organizations, 5 countries, and targeted capacity building focus. TAF has helped grow fledgling entities into stronger organizations and enhanced civil society organizations' skills, organizational strength, and stature. I also want to thank the Office of Security and Transnational Affairs, past and present, for their stewardship of this exceptional program, including Dr. Valerie Bigley, who has been with the program from day one. We also have Anand Krishna here, who is in our Office of Security and Transnational Affairs, and also one of our alumni, I see Dan Schulman. Dan also was with the program shortly after it started, and I know you all share my joy at seeing the kind of things that we've been able to get out of this great program. So where do we start? We're celebrating the completion of a landmark 5-year program that brought tangible progress on transparency, citizen engagement, government civil society communication, and broad democratic principles. The $17.2 million South Asia Government Fund was established in 2019 as the South and Central Asia Bureau's flagship initiative supporting civil society in 5 South Asian countries: Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. The fund was designed to respond to the Transparency Initiative, the Indo-Pacific Strategy, supporting transparent, accountable, and responsive governance throughout the region. And with the fund, just to be frank, we did what good bureaucrats hate the most. We took a chance on a concept that we didn't know if it was going to work or not. We had the first inception workshop in January of 2020 and left Colombo feeling pretty good about this idea. Valerie was there. Valerie didn't know if she was going to be able to leave Colombo because we all know what happened in early 2020. A few weeks later, the world shut down in the midst of a global pandemic, and with changing priorities, we questioned whether there'd be any demand for this new fund we were standing up. But within weeks, we had received over 400 proposals, and that reflected the strong demand from civil society organizations throughout our region, and our strategy began, and we understood that this concept was going to make a huge impact. So our strategy began with the belief that we could best realize the vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific by supporting and strengthening civil society and independent media. We also wanted a different model: flexible funding, flexible programming, tailored capacity building, an extended time horizon, and a regional focus. And Valerie tells me that 2/3 of the programs are actually done outside of the nation's capitals, which I think really focuses on an area that we're not always active in. The other important part of this wasn't just a Washington initiative. It was driven by the field, with partners telling us what they thought their communities needed most. And our goal was to create a vibrant, sustainable civil society communities in each of our 5 countries and cultivate regional conversations about shared governance challenges. So what did we achieve? Well, this last year of the fund, 2024, saw so many changes in governance across South Asia. And we also know that our civil society partners have been instrumental in fostering those positive changes, pushing back against corruption and constrained civil rights, improving transparency and protections for vulnerable populations. And These organizations were ready to go, in part because of the training and the preparation and the network supported by the South Asia Governance Fund. So let me give you a few examples. In Nepal, Policy Entrepreneurs Incorporated assessed large infrastructure development projects funded by foreign donors, including Nepal's neighbors. Their work increased public demand for transparent investment in Nepal, improved journalists' capacity to report on these kinds of stories, and shed light on government procurement practices. In Sri Lanka, when the Express Pearl caught fire off the coast of Sri Lanka in May of 2021, the Center for Environmental Justice was positioned to respond in real time to take legal action. The center's work across 7 court cases has exposed bribery, corruption, and officials' neglect of statutory duties. The Supreme Court in Sri Lanka has repeatedly decided in favor of the Center for Environmental Justice, initiating corrective actions. And local government officials rely on the CEJ for guidance when they need to stand up to corrupt politicians who wish to circumvent the law. Local officials also request training from the CEJ. In Bangladesh, the Center for Policy Dialogue produced high-quality economic analysis focused on infrastructure and public sector indebtedness in the context of declining foreign exchange rates. Bangladesh's RAPID, or the Research and Policy Integrity for Development, examined Bangladesh's pandemic fiscal stimulus packages. Their engagement with the Ministry of Finance and the central bank resulted in lower interest rates for loans for women, or women-owned cottage and micro businesses, and a new stimulus package for these small business owners. And in Sri Lanka, the final grant awarded by the fund, Transparency International Sri Lanka requested funds to monitor the 2024 elections using multiple tools, including a crowdsourcing app they designed. In September's presidential election, Transparency International Sri Lanka recorded 33 complaints about the misuse of state funds and 48 complaints concerning state vehicles. In contrast, the November general election saw only 3 complaints about the misuse of state funds and 1 regarding state vehicles. Importantly, no complaints were received about the misuse of state power or positions during the general election. With the support of the fund, civil society has also gained credibility with many governments and policy elites, and many of our partners are now successfully advocating at the national and local levels for policy changes, and even better, government officials repeatedly reach out to them for their expertise and credibility. A couple of examples. In Bhutan, current and former members of parliament and representatives of oversight agencies continue to attend seminars hosted by the Bhutan Center for Media and Democracy, committed to inclusive and participatory local planning processes and infrastructure developments. Nepal's Chief Minister of Koshi Province praised the fund partner Nepal Institute for Urban and Regional Studies for their support in public investment planning after they conducted an extended review of the Provincial Planning Committee's 5-year plan. And the civil society organization Community Engagement and Outreach collaborated with the Federation of Nepalese Chambers of Commerce and Industries to work with municipalities in the industrial growth cluster of Koshi Province. But of course, the work is not done. So what's next? We are pleased to be starting a new cycle with TAF again as our implementing partner, and we know that we're going to enhance our shared policy goals in these 5 countries with a particular focus on strengthening regional connections. There continues to be a clear need for grants funding at the local level, especially to support vulnerable populations, build tolerance, and foster social cohesion. And there's also a keen interest and a keen need for flexible funding and support for innovative ideas from young, untested groups, often sources of vibrant, disruptive thinking and low-cost ideas that deserve funding. This requires some risk-taking on our part, but I think it is important as we see the next generation coming forward to recognize that they have ideas and we should be listening to them. Women are also still far less likely than men to speak English proficiently, which drives gender employment gaps. Women-led civil society organizations and peace builders still receive a smaller slice of foreign assistance funding globally. So these are opportunities that we as donors should be addressing. I also want to make sure that this next round leverages some of the keys to the success of the fund. The wide breadth of support, The wide network of the fund allowed us to support 91 organizations in 5 countries, plus 3 regional networks and multiple national level networks. The flexible funding allowed us to respond as needed to crises, such as the pandemic, and now climate change, as well as opportunities that came up, such as elections. Substantial, ongoing, tailored capacity building to every organization over the life of the award has ensured that civil society's longevity and diversity and sustainability will endure long beyond the life of these grants or the fund. And some small organizations have emerged as significant players in their sector. Larger organizations have seen their influence in policymaking and among thought leaders grow over the past 5 years, and they credit the fund's support with their success and their maturity as organizations. And when the pandemic hit, civil society actors were able to use their expertise to help communities. This ability to respond to immediate, pressing needs is perhaps one of the most innovative and valuable features of the fund. All of this is to say that the fund has demonstrated the power of the small grant, how flexible funding, flexible programmatic focus, and tailored capacity building can put civil society in the driver's seat to make decisions on effective programming for their constituents. I look forward to seeing what the next round can do, and I thank all of you for being our partners in this innovative risk we took 5 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Pleased to be in this panel with such esteemed partners. And I think that was one of the most outstanding opening, welcoming, summarizing remarks that we have heard. I think, in a sense, we can go for refreshment right now. Everything is controlled. I actually have nothing to, as an introduction to add. But other than really going about and introducing my panelists, this is a small sample of what we have done in the last 5 years. It has been very, very meaningful journey in South Asia. And even last 3 days, we have been together and we also learned each other from also more and more nuances that come out. We often take our civil society role in countries as granted, but we do things that does make difference. And our partners have been able to navigate a very difficult shrinking civic space in the last 5 years in many countries. We have also seen COVID, so navigating such a difficult circumstance does require outstanding partners like this. So out of those 90 partners, we have few selections in here, but we thank all of them. But just to get a representative sampling of idea, we have country-wide representatives in this panel. And let me introduce you the panelists on my immediate left. From Sri Lanka, we have Sharmola Gomes. She is from Center for Equality and Justice. She's the founder at ED. From Nepal, we have Dr. Jagdish Pokhara, who is the chairperson of Nepal Institute for Urban and Regional Studies, a think tank. From Bangladesh, we have Professor Mustafizur Rahman, a distinguished fellow from Center for Policy Dialogues. Professor Mustafa is actually, so Bangladesh recently published a white paper on economic corruption. So on 1st December morning, he was part of the team who published and presented to Dr. Yunus, and in the afternoon, he flew out of Dhaka to join us in here. So that's the level of commitment that we also have here. From Bhutan, we have Dr. Rinzin, Executive Director, Bhutan Transparency Initiative. And from Maldives, we have Mariam Chunana, founder and president, Public Interest Law Center. So we do have about an hour to go. I think we decided that we will try to maximize Q&A session. So we will be brief enough, but not too brief, not for anyone to understand your story. But also keeping in mind that there is an audience who made an effort to come here out of their busy schedule. So out of respect, we need to give them enough time. So 5 to 6 minutes each panelist, and if you have follow-up question, I'll follow up in that. So let me start with in Sri Lanka, Ms. Shamala Gomez. If you want to share your experience within the context that you have delivered, you talked about sexual bribery, corruption, and issues like that. You are very passionate about gender-related work. So let us hear from you about your journey in the last 5 years and also with the South Asia in general. Yeah.
Hi, God. And thank you to the Asia Foundation for bringing us here to share our story with so many different stakeholders. The Center for Equality and Justice is an all-women organization based in Colombo. We have 2 district officers, one in Kirinoti and one in Anuradhapura. And as I said, we are all females, which is an advantage in this context. I'd like to just jump in straight away to the work that we did at the CGP, but I just want to give a bit of an understanding of the context. And I think, as Ali mentioned it as well, but I think in a fast growing, shrinking space, and the fact that we as NGOs in the NGO sector sometimes find it difficult to navigate our work while trying to navigate through the sort of the obstacles of intense pressure from different parties, etc. And I think we have a situation where there are new repressive laws that are supposed to come in. We don't know what will happen, but in terms of regulation of NGOs, etc. So that is the kind of space that we work in, and many of us find it quite difficult. But stepping into the work that we do and we have done under this NGP, I think what we did was really to bring in a gender element to the issue of governance and transparency and accountability by looking at the issue of sextortion or sexual bribery. Sexual bribery is a term that we coined because we felt that it resonated better with the communities that we work in. Rather than sextortion, which kind of is more, westernized and somehow there can be other connotations to it. So because of that, we coined the term sexual bribery, and that seems to have got stuck in terms of different stakeholders, usually including policymakers and lawmakers in Sri Lanka. Under the SAGP, what we did was initially, as I mentioned this morning as well, we are always asked by lawmakers, why are you suggesting change? Why are you asking for reform? Why are you asking for a certain policy to change? Or why you want a certain law? And they always ask for evidence. So what we did was we found the evidence first, and that was to basically look at research. We initially, prior to SAGP, we have been working on conducting research in the northern province, in the east, among military widows, looking at where public officials have been asking for sexual forms of rights from women. Under SAGP, we were able to actually take that research forward and looking at the justice and the health sector and finding cases where, which was quite a challenging task actually, around the country, to look at cases in the justice and health sector where women and the LGBT community and sex workers had been asked for sexual rights by public officials. So that is where we found our evidence, and what we did was we used that evidence base to do our policy and advocacy work, and it so happened that, what should I say, it was a very opportune moment that SNGP came along and that we were able to actually do this work because the windows of opportunity miraculously opened during that time period for our work. And why I say that is because, as I mentioned to you, we have the research. What we did was we wanted change in terms of the law. So law reform was something that we focused upon, and the reason being that what was there prior to 2023 was a bribery act. It was quite archaic, it was passed in the 1950s, which didn't really spell out many things, including sexual forms of bribery. Although case law through the judiciary, you had cases where they talked about sexual forms of gratification. There was nearly nothing expressly in the law itself. So during SAGP and between the two phases, we were able to talk and lobby and advocate with lawmakers and policymakers to bring in sexual bribery into the anti-corruption law that came out last year. Now, this you may think is not such a big deal, but really it is in a context like in Sri Lanka, which is extremely patriarchal in nature, in a situation where, lawmakers, there's a dominant male population in there, the policymakers do the same things, and to be able to bring the word sexual into an anti-corruption framework is a mega achievement, because you don't have this kind of recognition even globally. Even globally, I mentioned again that the UN Convention against Corruption uses the term undue advantage, which can be interpreted in many different ways. Here we have the term sexual in the law, which is extremely progressive and can be taken as an example in many other different countries. Because when we first actually under CATP again, we approached the Bribery Commission. The Director General there asked us, why are you talking about this? We don't get cases. We don't get cases. Well, I was able to tell him maybe that is because you don't talk about the fact that sexual forms of rights are rights and do come under that corruption framework. So that was basically something that we were able to talk with him about. And over the years, throughout the SHB program, we approached different stakeholders that could be involved in implementing this law. Last year, the law came out, and one of the most important things about that law is the fact that you now have, as I mentioned, sexual forms of bribery under the anti-corruption framework, alongside a criminal framework, criminal law framework. And why it's important to bring it under the anti-corruption framework is because issues of consent do not come up under the anti-corruption framework. That is why. Because under criminal law, you would need consent or to prove that there was no consent in order to prove an offense. Here, you don't need that. All you need is a question of quid pro quo, abuse of authority, and those are the, and coercion. Those are the elements that you need to prove that extortion has occurred. So this is the reason why we believe that it's really important to have sexual forms of rights recognized and bringing the gender element into anti-corruption, which is extremely important, hardly ever recognized as a criminal offense or a corruption offense. So this is why we believe that it's important. The other is that with the Anti-Corruption Act, the private sector is also covered. Prior to the Anti-Corruption Act coming out, prior to that, the private sector was not covered by the law. But now we have a situation where corruption and bribery, they are also covered under the Anti-Corruption Act. And this is again very progressive. And what we found with our work under the SHGP with the private sector is that many of them, the big companies and the banks, did not realize that they are covered under the anti-corruption framework now. This is why we believe that there's more work to be done. And the fact that we need to continue to work with the private sector, similarly with the legal profession, in trying to get this out, the message out there that they too are now covered and they need to watch their backs in a sense. So I'll just leave it there. If there are further questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gowaz. So now from the island state of Sri Lanka, we move to the mountains, specifically Mount Everest. From Nepal, we have Dr. Jagadish Pokharel, Chairperson of Nepal Institute for Urban and Regional Studies, a think tank based in Kathmandu. Please, Mr. Pokharel, Dr. Pokharel, you have 5 to 6 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank the Asia Foundation of D.C. and also in Nepal. And Sri Lanka for arranging this bringing us together and discussing some of the things that we have been doing over the past 5 years or so. My name is Jagdish Pokhriel. Like I mentioned, I head the institution called the Institute for Oceanic Studies. It's a think tank organization. We basically take an approach where we say change after change, how to make the government work. How to ensure some of the uh, values that have been inculcated in our constitution, basically inclusion, equity, justice. Um, we work at three levels of government. The new constitution of Nepal has three tiers of government: federal government, provincial government, and local governments. The local governments and federal governments are there historically; they are not new. But the provincial government is something new. So for the federalism system to work successfully, this third tier and the middle of province, in the middle federal and local government, province has to be successful. So there's a challenge for the province. It is weak, they are still forming, they are still building. So the dual challenge that they are facing is institution building and delivering and proving their relevance. That's very, very important. Moreover, what the challenges multiplies is the constant changes in the political party alliances that affects the continuity of the government. So the frequent changes of government at the provincial level makes it very difficult to assure people that this system is going to deliver. Because ministers change, policy change, and then there is this lack of clarity as to where the province is moving, what is going to happen, and this kind of situation. So we thought that it's important for this democratic system to actually work. We work with the provincial government so that some of these values are actually internalized in their operations and also better delivery for the people to be assured and trust this system. We started with the SAGP grant, small grant. First, we started with the investment authority. This Koshi province, which was the Koshi province one, once it used to be called province one, now it is called Koshi province. They had established an institution called Provincial Investment Authority. So we sort of got a grant from the Asia Foundation and said, let's start from there. What can be done to enhance the investment in the province so that the economy starts going, there is employment and so forth. Let's know about it. As we work with the provincial investment authority, we identify and suggested, advocated for the change of several policy constraints that was keeping them from making Koshi investment friendly. From there, then we realized that probably it is not enough. We were working with the investment authorities. So we moved to provincial planning commission. Every province, and there are 7 provinces, all provinces have provincial level planning commissions. So they actually make plans, periodic and annual plans, and we thought that's where we should enter. So we started working with the provincial planning commission, help them to assess what they have achieved. They have developed the first periodic plan, generally meaning 5-year plan. And after evaluation, we thought there needs to be quite a few changes. And then by that time, the second periodic planning time has started. So we started reviewing, conceptualizing the plan such that the Provincial Planning Commission would come up with a document acceptable to all political parties so that even when governments change, that document will change. The policy will remain, major projects will be the same, and there will be some kind of continuity. So that was a consensual document that we helped them to develop, for one. Number two, what we did was brought political parties together, so that they could agree on basic philosophy of that plan. In this process, again, we brought also the private sector, so that they would be ready to accept some of the policy elements there. So that's how we supported them. And in this process, it was not only NIAS and my institution, we formed a consortium of 3 other civil society organizations, 1 private sector organization, to help the Kosi province to make some of these plans and then implement it such that the targets would be achieved. So there is a consortium which we work together even now. And at the province level, the private sector and the provincial government, they work together. And within the process, there is a critical mass of professionals, academics, yes, and others, who actually support this document, this plan, objective, and in a way run it. So there is that critical mass. So the message we are giving to other provinces is that come up with a good plan, participatory plan, more of consensual plan, so that even in the context of frequent government changes, you will be able to invest better for the development and also give a sense of better governance. That is the message we are improving, and they have been quite receptive so far. That's where I would like to end so far. If there are questions, I will take up later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. English. From the mountains, now we move to the plainlands, the land of the murky waters of Bangladesh. It is in trouble right now.
Thank you, Faisal. Good afternoon, dear friends. I'd like to take this opportunity to register our deep appreciation of the support that we have been receiving from the Asia Foundation, which has been critical to the work that we have been doing. As Faisal was mentioning, we are passing through a very challenging time, but also it's a time of great opportunity. And that's the spirit in which we'd like to take this. My Center for Policy Dialogue was set up in 1993 when Bangladesh was coming out of the decade-long military rule of the 1980s. And it was one of the very first civil society think tanks in Bangladesh. The period when we got the support from the Asia Foundation, that period coincided with when a democratic government gradually degenerates into authoritarianism and autocracy. So that was the period when the program that we have implemented with support from TAF coincided with. And what we wanted to do is that, of course, the civil society space was shrinking. There was less space for voice. Any program that had democracy, corruption, good governance was not permitted to be implemented in Bangladesh. So that was the period when we partnered with the Asia Foundation. And I think one of the 3 distinctive features that I found in that partnership, one is demand driven. We wanted to do what we wanted to do in that context, and Asia Foundation was supportive of that. We thought that accountability, transparency, building a parallel narrative is very important. Flexibility also, we thought that media should be a major partner, and Asia Foundation also provided us support for media capacity building in order to take our messages to the grassroots. So that was also very important for us. And the third point was that our own institutional capacity building, which was also very important in terms of the work that we had been doing. So as Ms. Elizabeth was mentioning, we did three research works in terms of the way the mega projects were being implemented in Bangladesh. Mega projects, by mega projects, we mean more than $1 billion. So there were 29 mega projects worth $87 billion. So we thought that this is a very good entry point to show how these projects are being implemented, whether there was accountability, transparency, good governance, good value for money. And we also pointed out that if these are overcapitalized and these are not implemented with good governance, our country will be saddled with external debt servicing liabilities, which will be unsustainable. And that's what we are now facing. So this was a very critical, entry point for to question the dominant narrative of Bangladesh being one of the highest growth country, a model development country, etc., etc. So we tried to build a parallel narrative which questioned that dominant mainstream narrative, that not everyone was getting the benefits of this development. Our income inequality, consumption inequality, wealth inequality was increasing, and one of the reasons being that there were a lot of corruption in the development paradigm that was being pursued. So that was something that for us was very important. And the second point is that we could anticipate, and it's very important that what the youth were wanting, because the revolution that we had on 5th of August, that was led by the students. In fact, when we did a student enclave, about 500 students were there, and we had a voting, and we thought that out of the 14 options that we gave them, the first and second and third will be prioritized by them, will be, quality of education, employment opportunities. But what came first was Cyber Security Act, the Digital Security Act. You see, so the priorities of the young generation, that was really, we lost our bet, but found a generation, so to say. And they were interested in ushering in a new era so that our past was not their future. So we had this monsoon revolution. Okay. Now this is an opportunity. Now the civic space is now expanding. There are a lot of challenges, obviously, as Faisal rightly mentioned, but we think that there are also a lot of opportunities. As he mentioned, the current interim government under the Nobel laureate Professor Yunus had set up a committee for the white paper committee, of which my colleague is from our center, who was also involved with one of the three studies that we did. He's the team leader. I am one of the 12-member committee member. So we have submitted our report. That was an exercise in transparency and what is the real state of Bangladesh economy. And there, the works that we did with the Asia Foundation came in so handy, because we could base some of our findings on that. And now he has set up 10 other commissions: Electoral Commission, Police Administration, Public Expenditure Commission, etc. So this is an opportunity for us in going forward to implement those, helping the government or the elected government that will come to implement those. And I think that if there is a future collaboration opportunity, is a third phase of SCGP or something like that, I think that we have an entry point where we can, in going forward, we can implement and help the government implement some of the recommendations that the committee will be coming up with. So I think that as a civil society think tank, our responsibility is to anticipate where are the problems, and whatever government there is, to put a contrarian view, contestation of the dominant paradigm from the perspective of the common people. So it is very important that we take the message to the common people also. Our center also hosts a platform of 120 NGOs who work at the grassroots level. So whatever we have done with the Asia Foundation, we could also take it to the grassroots level through them, leveraging them, drawing the synergies. So I think that that is also very important. I would like to end up by once again registering the Asia Foundation for the opportunities that we had a partnership, and last of all, the capacity building of our institution, the support that was given was also very important in retaining our capacities within our organization, strengthening it, and the Zoom discussions that we had also allowed us to learn from our partners, the several partners in all the 5 countries. So that was also for us very important, how they are tackling the challenges, what are the innovative solutions they are coming up with. So I think that that is also something that we should keep in mind if we if and when we go forward in another phase. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So with a mixed cautious optimism in Bangladesh, we now go to full gross national happiness. Back to the mountains again. Dr. Rinzin, please.
Thank you. This is Uncle from the land of happiness, and also popularly known as the land where stress. To put things into perspective, once again, to put things into perspective, for your information, for those who do not know, parliamentary democracy started in Bhutan only in 2008, and the Civil Society Organizations Act was passed only in 2007 and implemented, which basically means civil society organizations, as we know today, were formally registered only in 2010. Therefore, civil society organizations, as we know today in Bhutan, are only 14 years old. Not to say that civil society never existed in Bhutan. Because we are talking about civic space in South Asia, even for Bhutan, Civic has raised Bhutan's civic space as restricted. And especially the civil society organizations in Bhutan helped this during the last couple of years. For instance, the Civil Society Act was amended in 2021, and the amended act came out entirely opposite to what we expected. So the amendments came out with more restrictions on civil society organizations, like imposing endowment fund of 3 million, which is about 36,000 US dollars for even public benefit organizations. The composition of the board, we were hoping that before it was a total of 5, 2 from civil society organizations and rest from the government. We were hoping we would have 3, but then when the amendment came out, it was 5 against 2 from CSOs. Before the old act, as per the old act, we could the civil society authority board chair could be elected, but then the amended act made it compulsory for home minister, a political figure, to become the chair automatically. And then surprisingly, CSOs were actually trying to build a network, trying to come together, have a common platform where we could discuss issues of common interest. So we have been quite successful. In fact, we revamped our own CCC coordination, collaboration, and committee of the CSOs into what we call the civil society network, and we were doing quite well. Actually, the civil society network was doing quite strong, and in fact highly visible, which did not do us any good because the government in power there became nervous, and we were shut down. We were asked to dissolve. This came as a big blow to civil society organizations in Bhutan. Nevertheless, we realize that when you are a CSO, you have to understand the socioeconomic and political environment, which are quite dynamic for a country like landlocked country and economically disadvantaged country like Bhutan. So we knew that we had to understand this. And although just 2 years ago, when all this happened, when the civil society civic space was becoming more and more restricted in Bhutan, Bhutan was going through a major change. We just came out of the pandemic like everybody did. We faced the biggest economic crisis of all times. And then the government had no choice but to come up with major transformation exercise, especially for the civil service. But then, well, the unintended consequences of the policy was that a lot of civil servants started, resigning from service, and that led to many youth, Bhutanese youth, unprecedented in Bhutan's history, leaving the country. Today we have almost about 200,000 Bhutanese. We are less than 800,000. We already have almost about 900,000 living outside. So obviously the government in power got nervous and had to, I think, impose a couple of restrictions on various organizations. Nevertheless, the CSOs came together and we understood that the problem, like with ourselves as well, the executive and even the legislature did not understand what civil society is, did not understand how CSOs functions. So we went on a rampage of trying to create awareness on what we do, trying to improve collaboration with the government, and we succeeded in developing a CSO government collaboration guideline, a draft one, and then we also managed to draft Parliament CSO collaboration strategy, which was passed, needs to be implemented though. So in a way, things started improving, and we knew that CSOs will have to really enhance our credibility, build trust, especially with our stakeholders, especially the bureaucracy, the executive. Therefore, with funding from the Asia Foundation, the CSO fraternity in collaboration with the Anti-Corruption Commission of Bhutan and the CSO authority, we drafted standard, a minimum set of standards for ourselves, what we call Bhutan CSO accountability standard. So 2023, we drafted it ourselves, we adopted it, and now it is a regulation which is being implemented, which is being the implementation is being overseen by the government counterpart, which is a CSO authority. So today, CSOs in Bhutan are looked upon by most of our stakeholders, even the government, as credible partners, not opponents, but partners in development, partners in furthering the interests of the nation. Nevertheless, we have had gains, but then to sustain these gains, especially for economically disadvantaged country like Bhutan, we need further support from partners like TEP. The strategies that we have developed that I mentioned needs to be put into action, and for that we need your support. And thank you for supporting us thus far as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Rizal. From cooler mountain now to the warmer sunshine, also happy nation, Maldives. We have Mariam Shunana, who will be talking about how her organization, a group of lawyers, are changing the civil society landscape in Maldives.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. So, my name is Mariam Shunana. I'm from PILC, Public Interest Law Center. So, what SAGP has done is SAGP has helped thousands of people struggling in poverty in our country. So, when I say I'm from Maldives, many people think that it's a heaven on earth. It's so beautiful. Yes, it is beautiful. But in that heaven, there are people who are struggling. For some people, it is really a hell. And I am one of those people. I am one of those. I have come from a marginalized and underprivileged community, so I understand what it means is poverty, what it means to uh, sleep in hunger as a kid, but it means not to have space to study and street. So this is why when I grew up, I thought I would do something. I would do something to help people in poverty. And in 2018, when I came back after studying in USA, I was blessed to have these opportunities to study in USA. But there and now to be here dressed well and to have some food and good food. But there's people who are still struggling in the world today, in Maldives today. They have no avenue to seek justice because of their poverty. So when I went back in 2018 to my country, uh, there was so many human rights violations that was really affecting the vulnerable community in the Maldives, especially the migrant worker community in the Maldives. So a group of lawyers with me, we were so frustrated with the system, and then we formed this organization, PILC. But something we did not, we actually formed the organization because of passion, because of the momentum, but we did not expect the financial resources and human resources needed for an organization like this. And since this is the only one and only organization that provides legal aid for the vulnerable community, amount of caseload that was coming was overwhelming. But then, thankfully, Asia Foundation, this project has exactly helped us to continue our work, to help those migrant workers who are really in a desperate situation. And when we actually started our aim was to collect data on exploitation of migrant workers in the Maldives, especially targeted on Bangladeshi workers. But I wasn't expecting, I hear these stories, but I was not really sure that this was happening. But we heard and we saw stories that were mind staggering, stories of women being sex slaves, stories of women being forced to marry, human trafficking, and people who are not being for 5 to 6 months. And in this modern world, they are doing modern slavery. This is in the country where you call heaven, but the lives are hell. So we wanted to help them, and through this research work, one of the beautiful things of this grant was that we were able to travel to the island communities where the migrant workers were, and we set up our table in rural islands in the open air, mobile legal aid clinics, and on one side there was lawyers, and one side there was researchers, technical people who collected the data, and so we worked together with even with the Bangladeshi community, Bangladeshi Rainbow Organization. They were there with us, and we collected data, and we were able to actually understand the real reason for these problems and find on the face of it what the problem is, what the solution for this problem is. You would not know. Once you go into in depth into these details and collect research and data and analyze it, you will know the full picture. So being only a lawyer was not enough for this task. We hired technical research people who collected data and analyzed the situation, and we got the solution. This human trafficking is not really is a global phenomenon. So it's very important to understand from the perspective of the source country. So we work together, three groups of people, we work together and found solution to these issues. And we have thousands of migrant workers who are in vulnerable situation. Some people who are at the brink where they sometimes call us and say that we have no choice, I'm going to commit suicide. So in the middle of the night, they call us. It is very sad to hear. And then we have to involve Human Rights Commission, we have to call Human Rights Commission and help them. We have, however, this grant has actually gave us resources and funding to have. And additionally, what this has meant is this has created a momentum, a movement. We not only created the data and we passed litigation and courts to get salaries for their wages. In the Maldives, there is the culture in Maldives, very sadly, the xenophobic mentality of some people in the Maldives. Because of that, there is racism involved. Migrant worker community is treated as second-class citizens. But what we targeted was in social media, through our social media, we created a movement where working together with migrant community leaders from not only Bangladesh, from across the Asia, Sri Lanka, India, we created a movement and we spread awareness. Including, we also work with other grassroots organizations who are working on the labor issues, and now there is a movement, Migrant Matter movement, which spreads awareness, and I think we have contributed, in down the racism in the country. And I'm very thankful for the Asia Foundation and SAG that has made immense impact and had thousands of people literally saved their lives, and I'm very thankful.
Thank you so much. I think whenever I listen to stories and experiences of civil society leaders like this panel, it reminds me of the short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Ovela. And I think I tried to make a quote out of it. So just before Q&A, I think it may sound something like, a true civil society leader is like those who walk away from Ovelas, not content to live in comfort built on another's suffering. They bear the burden of seeing injustice, but instead of turning away, they step forward to build a world where no one must sacrifice their dignity for the joy of others. So with that, thank you, panelists. Let me open it up for Q&A. So please raise your hand and let us know your name and organization. We'll take a few questions and then try to answer them in that case.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Blair Glencombs from Accountability Lab. Thank you to our panelists, some amazing work and stories. You talked a bit about some of the obvious ways that civic space might be restricted. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about some of the less obvious ways that governments might be restricting some of the fundamental liberties and rights that you would expect, and how you're dealing with those. And conversely, where there are pockets that space is opening up and there's more room to talk about topics, what are those, and how you build upon those in ways that we could learn from?
Thank you. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I think
yes, are there less obvious ways that governments are closing civic space in your countries? And how are you dealing with those issues, or the ways that governments are doing them? And then are you finding areas that civic space is opening up that we might not know about, and how are you building on them?
so. It's about less obvious ways that civic space is being shrunk, and also topics that can open up civic space. And how do you utilize that? Who's next? We'll take a few questions and then answer, or we can wait.
Yes, my name is Vinay Bhargav. I'm from Partnership for Transparency Fund, and as many of you know, since we talked to you yesterday, we support the grassroots civil society organizations And we are very happy to hear about the successes that you have achieved in civic space environments, as Blair mentioned, which are not always very friendly. My question to you is in terms of the challenge our partners face is the imbalance in the power. You know, when the grassroots organizations try to hold either the government officials accountable or the international financial institutions, such as World Bank and Asian Development Bank accountable, there is a huge imbalance in power. Yet, many of these civil society organizations are able to achieve success, even if it is limited success in limited areas. So I would like to ask you what lessons you can share in how you navigate around that imbalance of power and achieve success in the great work you have described. Thank you.
Thank you so
Hello, my name is Pablo Medel, Bank, South Asia Elizabeth. I have three questions. First of all, to the lady from Sri Lanka. I would be interested to hear a little bit about your experience with the implementation of this legal framework that you so successfully helped establish. What does it mean? How did it concretely improve the lives of women or those who might otherwise be affected by this kind of bribery? Yeah. Then for Bangladesh, I have a question about your view on the expectations that are now in place or happening, or that you perceive from the grassroots level and from your perspective as to and the reforms that need to be undertaken. How do you see the perspectives of the enthusiasm that has been, that we all observed and admired in summer, right? To this, to maintain, to stay, you know, and to be productive in the future. And to you from Bhutan, you alluded to this very important outmigration of young people and professionals from Bhutan, which is basically taking out a lot of capacity and human capital from the country. So if I understood you correctly, you kind of linked it to some degree to the suppression of the civil society in the country, the lack of freedom of speech and the lack of maybe other opportunities. So what do you think would need to happen in order for those who migrated to Australia and all these other places to come back, or prevent them from going there?
Let's try to answer this batch. There are some specific questions, so you can address them. One for Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Bhutan, and then also there are a couple of general questions. So you want to go ahead?
Yeah, with regards to the question on sexual bribery and the legal framework that we express legal framework that we had last year. I think the point is that it is the visibility that it has been given in many sectors. For example, I think I mentioned about the private sector and the fact that you're able to now bring into these conversations the private sector and the fact that they are covered under that law, which means that when we talk to private sector, you have more a willingness to embrace these principles into their policies. And we have an example from 3 weeks ago where we were told that under the CGP program, we had a roundtable with the private sector. They went back and one of those companies, one of the biggest companies in Sri Lanka actually came and told us subsequently that they have incorporated sexual forms of bribes into their code of conduct. So, these are tangible outcomes of that work that we were doing. In terms of, you asked about how did it improve the lives of women. And I think this is an important question. And actually through the SAGP, we were able to actually reach out to communities And we developed things such as coping strategies with the women. The women who were beneficiaries, we actually talked to them and they gave us the input to create coping strategies for themselves. So we worked with a mental health social expert who provided us with the input from the women, from the grassroots. So this is kind of the beginning. And I think what is important to know is that now moving forward, we need to try to make sure that women ultimately become the beneficiaries of this very critical sort of express legal framework that we now have. So that is moving forward. In terms of reaching out to the women who are impacted, and who might be impacted. It's not just women, by the way, it's also, people of diverse genders that can be impacted, and they're all covered under the Act. So I think we have a legal framework that we cannot ignore. So in other words, for example, the Bribery Commission, they have a legal framework and they can also, with their advocacy work in the grassroots communities, they can ask that more women actually report to them complaints of sexual bribery. Similarly, the police, they act as a referral service, and they would not deal with it, but they would be able to refer cases where women are able to be referred to the Bribery Commission for addressing their cases. So these are ways in which the legal framework now provides some kind of basics for these women to be able to complain different cases of sexual bribery.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Musa, please, take the balance specific question.
Thank you for that question. That is also what keeps us awake because these are times when there are a lot of aspirations of the people, such sacrifice and such profound changes have taken place. At the same time, to make the reforms which are being undertaken successful and sustainable is very important. What the interim government is trying to do is to strengthen the local governments. And we think that that is a very good entry point because the public service delivery are done at the local levels, but Bangladesh became increasingly a centralized state under the previous government. So what the interim government is trying to do is to decentralize some of the services through strengthening of the local government. So local government reforms commission has been set up. They will come up with some suggestions, and we are hoping that that will open up opportunities for a more accountable and transparent public service delivery. So that's the hope. But at the end of the day, as I was mentioning in the other meeting also, that elections will be taking place and it will be the political government who will perhaps implement some of the reforms that will be the recommendations. So we will have to see. But there, I think the role of civil society think tanks like ours and non-state actors, their vigilance and their work will be very important. There was also another question with regard to there's obvious ways how we have worked, if I understand correctly. Under the authoritarian regime, there were red lines which you couldn't really cross, but there were ways to circumnavigate those red lines. And that's what we tried to do. For example, the work that we did with the mega projects, everyone knew who was making the money, who was taking the money outside of the country, putting the country's future development under stress and risk. So what we did is that we didn't name names, but we identified the process through which corruption was taking place. So there are ways in which you can question the dominant paradigm. So that's how we were doing our work under very challenging circumstances where the civic space was shrinking every day, and there was a lot of risk in doing so. With regard to Mr. Vinay's question, it's very important, when there are powerful institutions, for example, like the World Bank and sometimes some of the policies are supply driven and not demand driven. So how do you contest those? And the only way we have found is to have our own institutional capacities, to question those, to produce our own evidence and data, and come up with alternatives which are feasible, and which are also realizable. So what we have done over the 3 decades of our existence is to increasingly strengthen our institutional capacities. And that was, for example, I was telling the other day that the World Bank used to come up with Bangladesh Country Economic Memorandum, which was the Bible of Bangladesh development in early 1990s. But then we started to produce our own independent review of Bangladesh development from the civil society. And that was one way that we prioritized our own demands, and then World Bank also came forward, and we could at least have some constructive exchanges, if not always we coincided. I think that going forward, it will be very important that we remain independent, and we have our own views with regard to whatever reforms take place and the implementation of the reforms, even under the interim government. We think that whilst we support many of the initiatives they are taking, it is very important that the accountability is there, the demand for transparency is there. And going forward, I think that we see it, at least from our institutions' perspective, that we should maintain our independence and not to be swayed away by the powers that be, albeit it is a welcome change that has happened. And that's how we can ensure the sustainability and the success of the very good reforms initiatives which are being taken by the interim government. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And Dr. Engineer.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to share my perspective and experience on imbalance in power. As civil society organizations, I think we have to be mindful that we will always have less powers than the rest of the world. We cannot expect to have as much power as the executive does, the judiciary does, the legislature does. Now, even in Bhutan, we have very powerful executive. Nevertheless, our experience is that the most important thing is about networking. Make sure that they know you. Make sure that they know what kind of work you are doing. Make sure that they are convinced that you are truly compassionate human beings. There to ensure that those who are not hurt by the government are hurt. Those who are not reached by the government are reached. And you are not an opponent. You are not a competitor to those who are in power, but a collaborator, a partner working for the same cause. This is what we have been doing in Bhutan. We never compete with the government. We always look for avenues of collaboration and cooperation, and try to create awareness on what we are doing and what we can do to ensure that the cause of the nation is taken further, how we can work together. In fact, for instance, in Bhutan, we don't say that CSOs are there to oversight on the performance of the government, on the public organizations. But we do a lot of oversight. We do oversight by providing building capacity of grassroots level people, especially the citizens, by training them on social accountability, and then using those social accountability tools to hold the service providers accountable. So indirectly, we do it. The Bhutan Transparency Initiative does a lot of oversight job. One of the most important one is we initiated a periodic study known as National Corruption Barometer Survey, which assesses the status of corruption in the country. We initiated that in 2016. Government recognized the importance of this, and today the government provides funding for this study. In fact, through this study, we assess the performance of the all government institutions, even constitutional offices. So I think it's all about being a CSO. It's all about diplomacy. In Bhutan, for instance, by constitution, we are allowed to go out in the street and make noise. No? But we don't do that. You would have never heard, like Bhutanese on strike in Bhutan. That's never happened in history because we try to be diplomatic and get out and get things done. This is a small experience that we have, and very importantly, one of the work that we did through especially SGP funding is assessment. We did a citizen report on the quality of services provided by the justice sector in Bhutan, and that included the judiciary. Judiciary and institution that is usually untouchable, cannot protect the movement of parliament. We did that. The report has been widely, distributed, and a lot of actions have been taken on the gaps that there were in providing access to justice, enhancing access to justice, especially to the vulnerable groups. So I have another one to answer. Exodus of Bhutanese, especially youth, to other countries, especially Australia and Canada. Well, it is one of the biggest problems that our country is facing right now. And honestly, we are totally lost as to how to handle this. The results that they are living, basically lack of opportunities in the country. Bhutanese learn very fast, and Bhutanese are voracious, consumers of technology as well, and popular culture. What used to be wants for Bhutanese just a couple of years ago are needs today. So our needs have increased. Therefore, and the economic situation and the social welfare has not increased much over the years. Therefore, especially youth, they are looking for greener pastures. Now the government is trying hard to ensure that we develop our economy as much as possible. In fact, I think most people all over the world know that we are so desperate that now we are trying to create a mega city through which we hope that we can make enough money to make sure that the income of Bhutanese is increased, so that they don't have to go out, and those who are abroad will come back to our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So there was this one question about less obvious ways civic spaces are being squeezed or closed, and some of the opening that you may think of as examples. I think,
Yes.
and then after you.
Before going into that question, I would like to also add to the imbalance of power. So when there is imbalance of power, the people's power and the media power plays a great role in navigating the situation. For example, I would say in Maldives, for the past 10 years, our government has a supermajority in the parliament. So we have no separation of power. We have a defunct anti-corruption commission. So when there's major cases pending at anti-corruption commission, there has not been looked into, there has not been investigated. So in 2018, What happened was that in an upcoming election, many parliamentarians who were suspected of corruption were running to the next election. So people were calling on social media for disclosure of corruption report, a major corruption where many islands were being given as a gift to some of the parliamentarians. So people were calling to disclose the anti-corruption commission report. But this was not done so, even though many people, even the transparency was calling for, but nobody was doing anything. Anti-corruption commission was silent, the president was silent. So one thing I did was I announced a protest on social media. This is very, like in Maldives, there was, people are not known to have protests, and women leading is something that is not acceptable for many people in the Maldives, probably because of the religious aspect. So what we did was we called a protest, and I called a protest, and people, many people from the public joined me. And what was the result was this is what I call, I was inspired by the Martin Luther King movement. This is what I call non-violent peaceful protest against corruption. So this movement led to disclose not only the disclosure of the report that stacked ministries, that also caused removal of president of the anti-corruption commission, sacked the vice president and other ministers. So I think people and the media has a great power, and also the social media has a great power in navigating and making the authorities accountable in this government, and parliament is so powerful, and there's imbalance of power. Thank you.
Just to respond to the question on closing of civic spaces, I'm not sure what obvious closing and not so obvious closing is, but just to give an example of some of the different experiences of civic society in Sri Lanka. I think one of the ways would be how funds are dispersed, when they're coming from other countries, the fact that banks are also on alert, and on the pretext of money laundering, etc., that they are monitored, and sometimes we are told that the central bank is holding back funds. What I'd like to flag is the fact that this is all not consistent. It's not constant application of these various procedures, but inconsistent application of these procedures, which I impact more on certain civil society organizations and not so much on others. I don't know the reasons for that, but that does happen. It depends on the bank. Whether it's a private bank or it's a state bank, it can be certain banks which are more liberal than others. So these are some of the ways, and I think just to add to that, again, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but you have monitoring by the CID, by the TID, they go into district level partners, officers, or to their events, and they're extremely polite. Nothing happens to them, but they come in there, they sit there, they will watch what's going on, or listen, proceedings. So those are some of the ways in which you intimidate the society. There are those that are intimidated, and those who don't care. So you have that as well. I think the other way would be legislation. You have the Online Safety Act that came out, and now we are all cautious on what we put out there on social media. In terms of opening up, and I believe somebody that's on my head, but I don't know where it opens up really, but I would think that a new government provides an opening up, maybe a question mark on their opening up, we don't know, but we are hopeful. We are hopeful that there will be changes. And if we have a situation where an opening up would mean being able to engage more with the new government as civil society, then we would welcome that. Yeah.
So
what I can add to that is that in the last few months, we haven't seen any animated guests in our meetings. So that is good, but another unobvious way the civil society is being attacked is through online campaigns. There are some deep resentment, sentiment against, there's a lot of other issues that are now rising up that also makes us very, very vulnerable. So we ran out of time, but good thing is that we are going into a reception and there's a lot of time to ask more questions. So we designed this perfectly. So I welcome you all to the reception. Thank you very much for your time and attention.